Time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you, he says, on all who spend in good cause. Good deeds are opportunities, sparkling bright and true, raising you in the sight of Allah and adorning Al-Jannah for you. So rush to earn his reward. Don't forget the oppressed. And when you go to sleep at night.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulil Kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man tabi'a sunnatahu ila yawmiddin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome again to another episode of your weekly live Islamic show coming from Dubai. I'm your host Ismail Bullock, and with me today, as you know, we've been doing alternatively now, so 1 week me, 1 week Brother Gabriel. So with me again, no stranger to the show, he's been a regular now, mashallah, for the last few weeks. I don't know, maybe like something about marriage, it seems to be coming every week, but Brother Nabil Aziz is here.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
And of course, before we introduce our special guest, who's off the camera right now, give us a bit of a recap on what you went through, you and Brother Gabriel, last week. Because obviously the week before that, I'd been with you. We were talking about the polygamy and different aspects of that. So what did you guys cover last week?
So basically, the first thing we did was wrap up the polygyny discussion. The first two episodes and the week before last, it might have come off like we were against the brothers on this issue, and sort of, chastising the brothers a little too harshly. So we gave the sisters a dose last week.
So it's basically it's time to sister bashing time.
Yeah.
Basically.
So I mean, it was not. We were not bashing them, but it was nasiha for the sisters who find themselves in this situation. Basically, the idea is for them to connect to Allah and make sure that that's their primary relationship that their heart has. And the second thing was to have iman in Allah's qadr. And then after that, we went over the rights of the husband over the wife, because what we found was these days that sort of stuff doesn't get talked about. I don't know, maybe it's politically incorrect. And me, for example, not being in any sort of leadership position or having any authority whatsoever, it's easier for me to be politically incorrect and just go over all of the rights of the husband, the rights of the husband over the wife. So we went over all of the ayat and ahadith, most of the ahadith. And then we started talking about the so-called Muslim marriage crisis. And what we started talking about was the Muslims delaying their marriages longer and longer, such that it's not uncommon to find Muslims still single in their 30s and only starting to get serious about marriage then. And we went over the responsibility of the parents to get their kids married if they need to get married. And we mentioned, for example, some opinions. One of the opinions from Ibn Qudama in Al-Mughni, where he says that it's obligatory on the father to get his son married if the son is in a situation where he's, a little bit
hot-blooded.
Yeah, exactly. And we mentioned a statement of Shaykh Ibn al-Uthaymeen on the same topic. We spoke a little bit about the sin of masturbation and how it's better for you to marry a slave than to actually commit the sin of masturbation. We spoke a little bit about that, just to sort of impress the point upon the parents, and sort of drive it home that this is a really difficult situation that the youth are in, especially teenagers, and we've all been teenagers. I don't know, Sheikh, have you been a teenager? We'll speak to it later about that. And then basically sort of give them a push in that regard. So I guess today we want to continue with our discussion on marriage crisis. And I'll let you introduce our special guest, inshallah.
Well, our special guest today is no stranger to Huda TV, of course. It's Sheikh Asim Al-Hakim. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
And obviously, because we're live, so you're obviously here in Dubai.
Alhamdulillah.
I believe you're here for some, is it for a few days, or you're here for some lectures? Because we have many viewers who actually are watching this from Dubai. They might not be aware of your lectures that you're here, so maybe it's a chance before we go into the topic just to mention that.
Inshallah, I'm here for about like 72 hours. Tomorrow I have an early lecture in the morning for the parents, outstanding parents. Then we have Khutbat al-Jum'ah, inshallah, in English. And then in the evening there's a talk by the best of the best. It's about the Al-Khulafa al-Rashideen, the rightly guided caliphs. And on Saturday, inshallah, we have also a Q&A session that would be like 2 or 3 hours long in the evening. And that's about it.
MashaAllah. So going on from, you touched upon the rights that the husband has over his wife, correct?
Yes, we went over all of the...
So maybe the Sheikh could touch, I mean, obviously, to go into great detail, but maybe you could touch on the opposite side of the coin,
Okay.
as they say.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. جزاكم الله خير for having me, and it's always nice to be back on Huda TV. They say it takes two to tango. Islamically, it has to be through the nasheed, and it has to be with your wife. But it's true, you cannot do it on your own. So we always focus on the things that matter to us most. And this causes imbalance in a marriage. As a husband, I go to my wife and I say, you have to obey me, you have to do this, you have to do that. And neglect what I have to do. So I always take care of my rights and neglect my obligations. And this is why we have lots of divorces, we have lots of trouble. That's why a lot of the women complain about their husbands, because they're not being given their rights. And the Prophet ﷺ told us exactly what to do and what not to do. And he was our role model. So any fair person who would go and look at how the Prophet ﷺ used to deal with his wives and follow his footsteps, he's in the clear. What are the rights of the wife over a husband? The basic rights, and this is the bare minimum, is that you feed her, is that you clothe her, is that you provide her with the shelter, is that you take care of her religious duties and protect her and preserve her from anything that can harm her. Which means, unlike what a lot of the brothers do, you do not force her to work. And I've seen this personally. When the husband sits back home playing with his PlayStation or Xbox, and he lives off benefits, of course, and he, from a Kafir government, he lives off the benefit and he bashes the government day and night.
Oh, not just that, and he usually has 2 or 3 wives in the same, the same thing.
Unannounced.
Who are all unannounced, and they're all claiming that their husbands have left them. So we touched upon that in the whole polygamy thing, that they claim that the husbands have left them, and they have to go and claim that they're a single mother. My husband's done a runner, as they say. Well, like you said, he just goes from house to house on his Xbox.
And then he forces the wife to work. Not only that, to give him alimony, to pay for the rent, to pay for the school, to pay for the groceries. And this is totally against Islam. And when it comes from someone who claims to be practicing, this is an insult to the Muslims, to Islam, and to everything that we know of. So the basic rights for a woman is to be the queen of the house. She's the one who's served. She's the one who is given money and being protected. And it's the man's job to work his backside off, trying to make a living and trying to provide for her. Among the basic rights, now, I'm not talking about what is the top. I'm talking about the bare minimum. He is not to strike her, to beat her. It's not permissible for him. He is not even permitted to insult her. or to say that your face is as ugly as a monkey's face or whatever. Like a lot of people say, this is totally prohibited in Islam. But people are not doing this. They keep on insulting their wives when it comes to beauty. Look how fat you are, look how ugly you are, you're untidy. And this is against the Prophet's teachings. He told us not to do this. And he told us not to abandon a wife in the house. So if I'm having a fight with my wife, a disagreement, I don't like her response to me, her argument, her nagging, so I leave the house for a week. This is totally prohibited. It's not a hotel that you come whenever you wish. This is your house, this is your family. You're obliged to come and sit, even if you don't like it. Be a man, act like a man, and talk your things over. So these are the basic rights. Of course, you build up from there upwards. And you add to that kindness, generosity, courage, looking the other way, which is one of the things that the Muslims must implement in their lives if they want to have a good marriage. Not only that, if they want to have good relationship with others. It's called in Arabic at-taghaful. And it is the top of moral conduct and excellent character, which is literally looking the other way. She said something, she did something. Look the other way, pretend you did not see it. Not because you cannot react or respond, but because you have a good character. And people make mistakes and you look the other way, pretending nothing happened.
I mean, that would surely as well, inshallah. I mean, that would also the hadith of when whoever's arguing and they stop arguing, even if they are right, then they will have a house in Jannah. Surely that would also be something that should motivate us as well.
The Prophet guaranteed this, alayhi salatu wasalam, and he said that I am a guarantor of a house at the bottom of the Jannah. Whoever leaves argument or debating, even if he's correct. But this is even higher level. No, I'm talking about the basics, which is on a daily basis.
Something that springs to mind is the scenario where we know the Prophet ﷺ used to help in the house, used to sometimes sew his own clothes, used to do various tasks. And now we find that the many Muslim men, if you were to even suggest that, they'd be like, me, I'm a man, I'm doing that. So what can we kind of advise maybe the brothers who are watching this who never help their wives, never help with the changing the baby's nappy, for example, or even just, making their wife a cup of tea, for example. She's, depending on the situation, but she could have been cleaning all day at home and looking after his children, and he doesn't even do the simplest thing like help her and make her a cup of tea. So what kind of advice can we give to a lot of brothers out there who are maybe watching this and kind of thinking, oh, that sounds like me?
Okay. The Prophet's life, ﷺ, was into two parts. One part where he did not work at all. And this was not because of him. This was because of the superiority of his wife. May Allah be pleased with her, Khadija. The Prophet was once there and he said, Khadija, Jibreel is giving you salam, peace be upon them. And he said that give the glad tidings to Khadija that Allah has granted her a palace in Jannah made of a big pearl that has no shouting or loud noise, and it has no means of being tired, meaning that she is not going to work. Scholars say that this is the reward of Allah for Khadija, who gave the same treatment to the Prophet ﷺ. So nowhere in his house you would hear loud noise or nagging or shouting or children, and at the same time she would not make him work. This is because of Khadija, of her superiority. Now in Medina, the Prophet had 9 wives, ﷺ, and they were all superior women, but no one was like Khadija. So Mother Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, tells us that the Prophet ﷺ, whenever he was home, he would work in the service of his family. So he used to fix his shoes, he used to patch his thobe and sew it, he used to milk his goat, and he used to do all the chores in his home. But whenever the prayer is being called for, he leaves and goes to prayer. I know a lot of practicing brothers, not a lot, well, this is an overstatement. I know some practicing brothers who would devote a whole day in the week and they do the cooking. So they experiment their Italian cuisine, their French cuisine, and seriously. And they spend the whole day in the kitchen. They do the dishes, they do the food, and the wife is like a princess, like a queen, being served at the day. Okay, the rest of the 6 days of the week, she works, like a maid. But at least he gives her this day off. I know brothers that have a day in the week that is totally devoted to quality time. So they go out to restaurants, they take the kids out. They try to compensate, though they will not be able, but they try at least to give some balance in their lives.
Well, I mean, practically speaking, I mean, isn't there some sort of mutual understanding that you can come to? You know how they do. You can split up the chores. Sometimes you might not like doing something, but you might have no problem doing other things as well. Me, I have a problem sort of, vacuuming the house, but I'm okay with doing dishes. My wife doesn't like doing dishes. We both take turns with the cooking sometimes. So isn't that something you can sort of, speak to each other and come to some sort of mutual agreement?
Definitely there is, but Akhi, we have to emphasize an issue that it's not one size that fits all.
Yeah.
So people are not all alike. I cannot expect a brother to come and say, listen, okay, I saw the show and I think I'm going to do this or do that. Okay, I went to my wife and said, listen, okay, next year I'm going to be pregnant. So this is not the way it's done.
Yeah.
But yes, if there's from the man some sort of compromise to help, this is great. You have to remember that the man's job is outside the house. The wife is a queen. So he's the one who works like 10 hours out of the house. He is the one who drives, and he has to tolerate the people, methods of driving, high blood pressure, diabetic, high cholesterol levels, and he's the one who has to pay the rent, he has to do the groceries, the shopping, etc. So once he comes back home, the logical thing is that he comes back to his safe haven. He comes back to his crib where he, lies low and relaxes and stretches his legs. Now, if he wants to add a little bit of chores to that, Jazakallah khair, may Allah reward him. But we cannot expect him to do something unless there is love and mutual understanding.
Yeah. As we move on to the issue of the situation, we have a lot of young people trying to get married, and this is a comment that we hear a lot, that people are finding it extremely hard to get married. In Islam we don't have dating. We don't try it before we buy it, as it were. So there is this hadith about the Sahabi Jabir ibn Abdullah radiyallahu anhu, where he's basically riding with the Prophet, and I don't have the full wording of the hadith with me, but alhamdulillah there's a sheikh here. So basically the story is that he's been married and he's rushing home to see his wife, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is with him, and he asks him whether he was married to a young virgin or an older woman, an old maid, or as it were. And if you could sort of tell us, give us some of the benefits of this hadith, because we have sort of two extremes in the community. One extreme is where the Muslim man will live his life and enjoy it, sow his seeds wherever it is, and when it comes time to get married, he needs he needs the girl next door, a virgin from back home, young, docile, things of that nature. And the other extreme would be some of the sisters would point to this hadith as an example and say, look at this example. He married an older lady. It's okay for me to delay marriage and get my master's and PhD and work on my career before I settle down. So could you sort of give us the middle way of this?
Okay. First of all, it is not something that, again, you can put a general rule. It differs from scenario to the other. So someone who is capable, young, and willing, we definitely encourage him to get married, because the Prophet said, ﷺ, "O youth, whoever is capable of getting married financially and physically, he should do so, because this is more protective for his chastity and for his religion, and helping him to lower his gaze. But those who cannot, they should fast. However, we cannot ask people to choose something they don't like. So someone who is like in his late teens or early 20s, he wants to get married. We say, you have the example of Jabir. You have to take a widow of 45 years of age. Nobody says this. And that is why the Prophet ﷺ, when Jabir told him, I married a non-virgin, O Prophet of Allah. And the Prophet said, why didn't you marry a virgin like you, who would play with you and you would play with her? So you would begin your marriage life with someone like you. So he said that my father was martyred, Abdullah ibn Haram, may Allah be pleased with him, and he left a lot of girls, my siblings, they're all sisters. And I did not like to bring another young girl to them. She could not take care of them. So I needed someone with experience, someone who is mature and old enough to take care of my sisters. So the Prophet prayed to Allah that he blesses his marriage. So in ideal situations, a young person should marry a virgin. Now, this does not mean that we leave the widowed or the divorced women abandoned. No, but they have to lower the bar as well. So when a young man wants to get married, he chooses, as the Prophet said, as someone for her beauty, her lineage, her wealth, and her religious practices. So he does have a choice. But the more he gets older, the choices should become lesser and lesser. And likewise for a girl, when she's in her 17s or 18s of age, is different when she's in her 30s. So she cannot pick and choose. She has to compromise, and she has to evaluate the situation to make the best of choices.
On that note, we'll just go for a quick break, inshallah. Join us after this short break.
It's time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you, he says.
We can't just take knowledge and keep it as information. We have to transfer it into action. When he got up, he said one thing. Asalla nas? Did the people pray? In Hajj, for example, the primary example of how multiculturalism really looks like. All equal. I've got a dentist in Canada. Even though he's ripping holes in my teeth, he's got great akhlaq. I love visiting him. Identify the issue. Analyze it. Challenge it. And then try again. Because if you fail, big deal. Try again and keep trying.
If I think I lost my ablution, but I'm not sure, do I have to make wudu again? Is it allowed for Muslims to visit the graveyard, or is that shirk? Am I allowed to say Jummah Mubarak to someone? Can I get to know a sister before marriage? I have so many questions, and I feel that I've just reached a dead end. If only I could find someone trustworthy to answer my questions. Someone who speaks based on proof from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet.
Time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward I will spend on you.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. And Sheikh Asim has left us because as you mentioned, he's here on a very busy schedule. So mashallah, he spared half an hour of his very busy schedule to come in, mashallah. And he mashallah himself was very proactive. He contacted me and said to me, I'm coming to Dubai. If you guys would like to have me on the show, so may Allah reward him for being very proactive in that sense. Usually we have to look for the guests. He, mashallah, contacted me in advance. So he had some very good points. Fortunately, he had to leave because he's rushing to another lecture in Dubai, and he, mashallah, he's been on his feet since the morning, pretty much non-stop. So he's very tired at the same time. So he mentioned about lowering the bar before he left and before he had to go for the break, and I think that's reality, right? Because you do get some guys like that. They've, like you've said, I mean, we're not astaghfirullah, not everybody astaghfirullah has played the field, as they say, or but many people have, or many people they may have not been practicing. Alhamdulillah, Allah guided them, and they became practicing at a later stage in life. So they had their fun, if you can, in the dunya sense, and they get to that age, and then they may be like 40, because he was studying until he was about 27, and then he was earning his money, having a bit of living the the playboy, maybe Casanova life or whatever, or maybe not, maybe he was still a religious brother, but he was just busy building a career and buying a house and getting his chips in a row, whatever they call it, and then he decides when he's 40, I have to have a 16-year-old, which may not be possible, and then he refuses to marry anybody who's this and she's not like this, and and you hang on, you're 40 years old, and if many people when they're 40 they look 40 or they look even older in many cases, so yeah, it's realistic. You have to kind of say to yourself, come on, there's many good sisters out there who you could marry. You don't have to literally marry someone from 16 to 20. That's it, no one else, because you yourself, spring chicken,
Isn't it a bit easier for the brothers, though? Don't you think that since the primary sort of criterion when a girl or her family is looking to get her married, the primary criterion is security and stability, and most importantly, this in the financial sense. So it's a little bit easier for a brother who's a little bit older to sort of, I mean, he still has choices. He doesn't have to limit his choices as much. If you think about it in a practical sense, we're not speaking, what's ideal as he should do, the ideal thing that he should do ethically, but just the way society is today, it's a little bit easier for an older brother. Say maybe if he's in his 30s, maybe not 40, that's a little bit too old. But if he's in his 30s or he's late 20s, it's a bit easier for him to find a much younger bride, because they're looking for the sisters are looking for stability and the family is looking for stability. Whereas if you compare the other way, there is this perception, and I don't want the ladies to be out there outside the station with the pitchforks. There is a perception in the Muslim community that the sisters have and I'm going to be politically incorrect here again, that the sisters have a sort of expiration date, that they need to get married as early as possible, and once they pass a certain age, their chances of marriage drop significantly. I mean, for the brother, he's going to get married, and it's not going to be a problem for him. Whether he marries a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old, he has no issues with getting married. The sister, on the other hand, once she passes a certain age, her chances of getting married drop significantly. So the comparison is not really that equal. I don't know. Don't you think so?
No, definitely. That's definitely a problem. And another problem that comes to mind as well is a lot of the youth, and you kind of touched upon that. But I mean, a lot of the youth now, they're with this kind of, in a way, an identity crisis. They live in a modern world. Many of them, they go to school with, even in the Muslim countries, a lot of the students may not be practicing Muslim, so they hang around with people at school. Sometimes there's no way around it. Who listen to music, who chat to girls, maybe. So then a lot of the, the youth. They hear many stories. A lot of the youth, they find it very hard when you say we're gonna, you're gonna have an Islamic marriage. You're gonna meet somebody, and a lot of them, they not because they're already dating, but because this has become the norm everywhere you go. People date, unfortunately, and many, much of what the media shows, or even the kids' cartoons these days, they have a boyfriend, girlfriend. Even the youngest of, could be Finding Nemo, for example, and there'll be something like that in there. So they have this, even though they may never have really dated, but they still have that thing where, how can I just marry some random woman that, the daughter of your friend or the daughter of mum's friend or whatever, So they have that kind of thing. So I mean, it's a difficult thing. How can we try and explain to the youth that this is the right way to do it? And it seems strange, but it works out, because I mean, I'm from the West, and there's so many revert Muslims who are used to the dating life. Some of them lots of dating life, and they end up marrying also a revert sister, and they literally meet each other for a short period of time and discuss and make istikhara, and then they end up getting married, and most of the time it's a very successful marriage. So how do you think we can try and relay that to the youth, or maybe even some of those youth who are watching this now?
I mean, look, it's the first fault is with the parents. Okay, most of the time, any situation like this, it falls down to the parents' tarbiyah of the children. Too often, the parents are, as Sheikh Asif mentioned earlier, that too often the parents are concerned with their rights over the children rather than their responsibilities over the children. And we've done a show about this, on two different occasions. One of them at Huda, where we talked about the rights of children over their parents. So here, it's the responsibility of the parents to make sure that the kids have the right tarbiyah, and that they're raised on the correct, Islamic understanding of things. And the second thing is that it's almost impossible to avoid this exposure to popular culture as it is today. Either they're hanging around people who are, don't have the Islamic paradigm, or they're exposed to media that is, degenerate. So that goes back to our point that we made last week. Why as parents, are you delaying the marriage of your children? It's especially a problem when you delay the marriage of your sons. A lot of the sisters, they get married a little bit earlier because, if they're coming from a Muslim family, because of this this perception, this issue of honor and things of that nature. The parents are a little bit more proactive and protective of their daughters than they are of their sons. And the situation, the way it is today, a Muslim man, it's going to take him a while before he's able to financially support a family. He needs to finish college. College is sort of like your receipt to make sure that you can get a job. It doesn't really actually teach you, real job skills that you're going to be doing. So he has to wait until at least he's 25 to sort of be financially able to get married. And until then, he's basically expected to fast for 10 years, maybe 15 years. Sadaqa Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the solution. It works, obviously, but practically speaking, as parents, are you expecting your son or your daughter, in any case, to fast for 10 or 15 years until you feel they're ready to get married? Rather, you should try to make some sort of compromise, and don't put them through that situation where they have to spend a decade or more basically boiling with lust, as it were, and falling into haram. Because in this day and age, unless illa man rahimahullah, whoever, except for those who Allah has mercy on, it's just a matter of time before they fall into some sort of sin. I know that people are responsible for their own actions. Yes, no, there's no excuse for you falling into a sin. That's your action. You're going to have to be accountable for it. But it's just a matter of time these days. It really is just a matter of time. Either they'll fall into pornography or masturbation or even outright zina. This is the situation of the Muslim youth today. So the parents really need to keep that in mind and have a serious think about this, about getting their children married as early as feasible. And the other issue, I don't know, maybe we could talk about this issue of culture and compatibility and the kids there. For example, you're from the West. You have immigrant Muslim families. The parents might be first generation immigrants, whereas the kids are born and brought up in those countries. They're essentially of those countries. Their culture is, for example, British or French or American or Canadian. And when it gets time to get married, the parents will import a bride or a husband from the village back home. And that leads to a number of problems. I think it's actually a misunderstanding of the concept of compatibility. You probably studied that in university, the issue of kafa'ah. So maybe you could, elaborate on that a bit.
Well, I mean that does happen a lot. Like you said, the children have grown up with a certain, even if they're practicing, but they've grown up with being used to a certain lifestyle, being used to certain culture, and they bring someone from, like you mentioned, from back home, maybe sometimes, like you said, from a village, sometimes, so there's no compatibility there. And obviously, even Islamically, when you're married, there should be, as much as possible, compatibility. Ideally, if the guy's from a village and the woman's from a middle class family in the UK, even Islamically, generally speaking, it's recommended that the woman, they don't marry the woman to someone who's of a not lower status in the sense of that, but will bring, cannot give her the kind of lifestyle that she's generally used to. So there's all those kind of clashes, and we hear a lot of the time, which obviously we probably haven't touched upon, but we hear of this, the phenomenon of the whole forced marriages, which we know Islamically, if it's a forced marriage, it's not a marriage. They're literally living as, they're not really husband and wife, because we know that one of the conditions is that the Muslim woman and man, but specifically the women, seem to be forced into it in some what you could say cultural Islam. And obviously, Islamically, if the woman doesn't agree, then the marriage is void. And that happens quite a lot, where they'll force this girl. She has no inclination to marry that person. She wants to marry somebody who's Muslim, of course, but, for example, can relate to her, knows where she's coming from, has come from that kind of, background, in a sense. And of course, that doesn't mean that we can't intermarry from different colours and races. That's we're talking about something different. You see, many people who, in the UK, wherever it may be, they marry people who are from different nationalities, but they still have something in common, in the sense of that person may be from a different country, but he may have a similar upbringing, so they can relate to each other on the daily basis. There's no language communication problem. There's no major culture clash. So that's an important factor which people just don't kind of take, and that leads in, ends up in all kinds of crazy scenarios and situations and oppression and sometimes even violence and all kinds of stuff. And that also gives a very bad image to Islam, because people assume that, again, like when people do crazy acts around the world in the name of Islam and whatever it may be, whether it's killing people or whatever it may be, and Muslims doing this and Islamic people doing this, which in reality most of these actions have got nothing to do with Islam. Likewise, the scenario of, because we're talking about marriage specifically, so we won't delve into every other topic, but also these whole forced marriages is completely unheard of in Islam. It's very foreign to Islam, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think there's also another extreme that is perpetuated by some of the youth, where they totally disregard the issue of compatibility, where the parents would be sort of going to extremes and insisting on the compatibility issue and getting someone from who's back home, same ethnicity, same culture, whatever, and they don't have any consideration that the son or daughter has grown up in a completely different culture. And the opposite end of the spectrum, where you'd have the son or daughter completely disregarding the fact that compatibility is an important issue of a successful marriage. So they just want to, have, they've been watching, too much Hollywood or reading too much romance novels or whatever it is, and they sort of have this idea in their head where I don't have this connection with him, or I don't have this connection with her, and they totally disregard the concept of compatibility and are you a right match for this this man or this woman, socially, in terms of education, in terms of upbringing, in terms of culture. I mean, you're from England. A man from or man and woman from West London, in some cases, he might not be compatible with a man or woman from East London. Isn't that the case?
Quite possibly, yeah.
Yeah. As which area of London is the posh one, and which area is the?
Oh, there's various areas,
Yeah.
but yeah.
But even in that situation, when you have the same country, there might be incompatibility there. You need to look at it from that angle as well. And people sort of they get their backs up, or they get a little bit annoyed when we talk about compatibility, because they think it's sort of some kind of classism or racism. It's not that. It's about the practicality of keeping a successful marriage going. It gets even it becomes even more of a disparity when you have a large country. For example, somebody from down south in Texas might not be compatible with someone from New York. The culture is different, the lifestyle is different, the upbringing is different. Just the way they think is different. And when you get in a marriage, it can cause clashes. And another thing, I think that people sort of put some sort of moral value on the age of a sister, or her education, or the fact that she might have been married or divorced before, or the fact that she's a revert, or even in the opposite case. Whereas Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that a woman is married for either her religion, or her beauty, or her wealth, or her lineage. And he said to choose the religious woman. And that's what your primary consideration should be. You should try to marry the religious woman first, okay? Because that's what will lead you to a peaceful and stable home over the long term. That's one constant that you'll find. If she's practicing before, and inshallah Allah keeps her firm and practicing, your home life will be much easier. And the other things, of course, we have our own personal preferences, but the primary sort of understanding and the primary criterion should be her religiosity. Isn't that the case? What about parents emotionally abusing their sons and their daughters to get married? It might not be forcing. I mean, in the case of a daughter, it might be forcing, but in the case of a son, isn't the son his own wali? Does he have to obey his parents and marry someone that he doesn't want to get married to?
Well, I've heard many questions like that posed to scholars like Sheikh bin Baz or Sheikh Uthaymeen, etc. And people pose the question that I want to marry a particular girl, my parents are against it, what should I do? And majority of the time, so when I talk about someone who's desperate to get married, he's been trying for a very, 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 very long time, and the parents just keep refusing everybody because of racism, or this person's too religious, we want you to have a modern woman who doesn't cover up. That's different things. Some of the scholars would say in that case then he can go against his parents, because he'll never get married like that. He'll never get married to a religious woman. That's what he's looking for. But I'm talking about in the case where one guy, he just said, besotted with this particular woman, when there's many other women like her. Many of the scholars are saying that you, in this case, if you know it's just this particular woman your parents just don't agree with, but they will generally let you marry another good woman, that it's better that you wait than you upset your parents, because it's all based upon the benefit and the evil, and the less, the harm is more than the evil, and vice versa. So a lot of them have said that for you to, and I've seen that happen even in marriages in the UK, where a Pakistani brother wanted to marry a black sister, for example, completely fine in Islam, but the parents were against it, and unfortunately for the wrong reasons. But there are other women out there, maybe they weren't from the same background, but suitable women from all aspects. And the brother went against his parents, and his parents were devastated, and they never really spoke to him properly again, and the relationship was really destroyed. And then 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years later, the marriage ended up in a divorce. So you can see in that kind of scenario where you could jeopardize the relationship with your parents, and we know that obviously that's a whole episode in itself, but we know the level of the parents in Islam. So a lot of people used to take those fatwa, the sheikh said in that one that this girl can go against the parents, and they implement that willy-nilly, and and same for the men. So there's definitely it's not something you can just fatwa shop and say, this sheikh said this, I'm implementing it on my situation. You need to go and ask, as these cases arise, a scholar, and ask him, what should I do? Because it's if you destroy the relationship with your parents, when there's, as I say, there's other fish in the sea. It's not like you're already married to her and you've fallen in deep love and you have the years together. That's a whole scenario. And your parents says divorce her, then that's a whole different ball game in that sense. But you're not even married to the woman yet, and there's many other fish in the sea, as they say.
Yeah, and I think even the sisters do have an out if they're sort of compelled or sort of forced or emotionally blackmailed into getting a marriage. If they're forced, they do have an out. They can go to the courts and get a divorce or an annulment, because she's not nobody can force anyone to get married.
Well, I mean, we've pretty much come to the end of the show. We've got about a minute left. I believe, inshallah, next week probably be most likely will be the final kind of show talking about this, because Brother Gabriel has an imam from the USA who's actually written a book that kind of discusses some of the taboo subjects within the husband and wife relationship, you could say the intimate relationship as such. And obviously we know to a certain extent, but Islam, there's no, Islam doesn't shy away from these things, because some things we need to know. Can we do this? Can we not do that? And there's some, you could say, cultural taboos that are completely nonsense in the intimate side of things. So, and this imam has written a book on it, which you can find on Amazon and everything. So he won't be in the studio because he lives in the States, but he'll be, inshallah, he'll be having a live interview on the phone. He'll be calling in maybe 10-15 minutes, discussing this and touching upon some of these things, which is, you could say, would kind of probably be the closure on this topic. But Jazakallah khair for coming in again. I'm not sure, I don't know if you'll be with us next week, who knows? If you'll be alongside Jibreel, who knows? But we've come to the end of this week's show. Jazakumullah khairan for tuning in as usual. And please join us, Brother Jibreel, next week on the conclusion, inshallah, of this topic. And I leave you as always. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you, he says, all who spend in good cause. Good deeds are opportunities, sparkling bright and true, raising you in the sight of Allah and adorning Al-Jannah for you. So rush to earn his reward. Don't forget the oppressed.